There is a beat-up, rust-streaked, barely running 1969 Chevrolet Camaro sitting in a used car lot in the opening act of a $210 million blockbuster. It looks like it belongs in a junkyard. It looks like nobody wanted it. And somehow, that broken-down yellow muscle car became one of the most recognizable vehicles in the history of American cinema. So, where did it go? Because the answer is not simple, not clean, and not the story most people think they know. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle. Why the '69 Camaro? The casting decision. Before we talk about what happened to the car, we need to talk about why it was a 1969 Camaro in the first place. Because that decision was not obvious, it was not automatic, and it tells you everything about what Michael Bay and the production team understood about the relationship between American audiences and American iron. The original Bumblebee in the Hasbro toy line and the 1984 animated series was a Volkswagen Beetle, a small, round, friendly yellow bug. Approachable, non-threatening, the little guy of the Autobot crew. And for a cartoon aimed at 8-year-olds selling toys, that made perfect sense. For a live-action feature film with a $200 million budget trying to put a robot on screen that an audience would actually believe in, a Beetle presented a problem. Specifically, it presented a size problem. The transformation sequences required a vehicle with enough mass and drama to sell the reveal. A bug turning into a 15-foot robot was going to look like a party trick. It needed to be bigger. It needed presence. But here's the part that matters. Bay and production designer Jeff Mann did not just grab the first muscle car that cleared the licensing agreement. They went specifically to the first generation Camaro, 1967 to 1969. And within that range, they went to the 69, the last and most refined expression of that generation. The long hood, the wide stance, the crease lines that catch light the way a blade catches light. There is an aggression to the first-gen Camaro's body that later generations softened. The 69 in particular has a face that looks like it is already angry at you, and that was the point. Bumblebee was supposed to be the underdog, the overlooked one, but he needed to be an underdog with teeth. A beat-up 1969 Camaro rusting in a used car lot communicates all of that in a single frame without a single line of dialogue. The car does the writing for you. That is what a well-chosen movie car does, and Bay chose correctly. The build. Who made Bumblebee? Now, let's talk about the build, because this is where the story gets genuinely interesting, and where a lot of the confusion about what survived and what didn't actually originates. The production did not use one car. They never do. For a film of this scale, with the kind of action sequences Bay was planning, you need multiples. What the production ended up with was a fleet of purpose-built Camaros, each configured for a specific type of work. The commonly cited number is 5 cars total across the production, though some sources put it higher when you count the partial shells and rolling props used for close-up detail work. The hero car, the one used for tight driving sequences, interior shots, anything where the camera needed to actually live with the vehicle, was built to the most complete specification. Full drivetrain, full interior, the works. This was the car you fell in love with. The stunt cars were built to the same exterior standard, but internally configured to take punishment. High-speed runs, the sequences where the car takes damage, anything that was going to be hard on the body or the mechanicals. Here is something worth knowing about what these cars actually were under the skin. The production sourced genuine 1969 Camaro bodies as the foundation. But the drivetrains, the suspension, the safety equipment, all of it was modernized. You are not running a stock 350 small block through the kind of sequences Bay was shooting. These cars were built to perform and built to survive. Roll cages, upgraded brakes, suspension geometry that could handle the stresses of a real film production. The exterior, the thing the audience saw, was period correct. Everything underneath was there to keep the car alive and the driver safe. The paint is worth its own sentence. The specific shade of yellow used on the production cars is a custom mix. Not a factory Camaro color, not a direct match to any period Chrysler or GM catalog. A production-specific formula developed to read correctly on camera under a wide range of lighting conditions. Anyone who has tried to replicate it for a tribute build will tell you it is harder to nail than it looks. It shifts between gold and yellow depending on the light, and that is entirely intentional. The car needed to glow. On set, what actually happened to these cars during filming now? What actually happened during production? Because the on-set story for these cars is not a quiet one. Transformers filmed across multiple locations, including Southern California desert sequences, urban environments, and the extended freeway chase work that defines the film's second act. Bay's production style is not gentle on vehicles. If you have seen his films, you already know this. Sequences are practical where practical is possible, and the camera is always close. That means the cars are working. Now, not rolling slowly past a camera on a flatbed. Actually working. The freeway sequences specifically were punishing. High-speed work on closed sections of California highway. Multiple takes. The kind of sustained mechanical stress that reveals every weakness in a build. One of the stunt Camaros sustained significant damage during production that required overnight repair work between shooting days. A detail that should sound familiar if you caught our episode on Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. Hollywood has always been hard on its cars, and the people who fix them overnight have always been the unsung part of the story. Here is an aside I genuinely love. The on-set nickname for the hero car among the crew was apparently just the Bee, not Bumblebee, the Bee. Like everyone had agreed to be casual about the fact that they were working on a film about a robot that turns into a Camaro, and the shorthand they landed on was a single syllable. That tells you something about how film crews operate. The extraordinary becomes ordinary very quickly when you are dealing with it every day. The Bee, park the Bee over there. Is the Bee fueled up? Legend. What is also documented is that Bay himself had strong opinions about how the car was used on camera. He wanted the Camaro to look genuinely worn in the early sequences and genuinely transformed, not just repainted. In the sequences after Bumblebee reveals himself as an Autobot, and the car gets its upgrade to the modern 5th generation design. That transition from rust bucket to gleaming muscle car was as much a character arc as anything in the screenplay. The 69 exists specifically to make that transformation land emotionally. You needed to see the potential before you saw the reveal. That is good filmmaking, and it required the production to maintain two completely different conditions for the hero car across the shoot. The cultural moment Bumblebee did to car culture. Let's talk about the cultural ripple, because what Transformers did to the first-generation Camaro market is not a theory or a feeling. It is a documented, trackable, measurable shift that played out in auction results and private sales over the better part of a decade following the film's 2007 release. And it followed a pattern that the classic car world should have seen coming, but largely did not. Here is how the numbers moved. A 67 through 69 Camaro in honest driver condition, maybe a repaint, maybe some engine work, but nothing restored to show quality, was a $15,000 to $20,000 car at a regional auction in 2006. Attainable, approachable, the kind of thing a guy with a decent savings account and a passion project mindset could actually buy on a Saturday and drive home on Sunday. By 2009 and 2010, those same cars were pulling noticeably stronger numbers. Not because anyone did a frame-off restoration, not because the supply dried up overnight, because the demand side of the equation changed. And it changed because of a movie. That is the mechanism. That is how Hollywood shapes collector car markets, and it almost never happens on release weekend. It is a slow burn. It is delayed by precisely the amount of time it takes for a 12-year-old sitting in a dark theater to become a 25-year-old with a paycheck and a very specific idea of what his first project car is going to look like. The Bullitt Mustang did this in the 1970s. The General Lee did it through the 1980s. The Supra from Fast and Furious did it in the 2000s. This is not a new phenomenon, but each time it happens, the classic car community acts mildly surprised, which I find genuinely funny. Gentlemen, we have seen this movie before. Pun absolutely intended. What separates the Transformers effect from those earlier examples is the specific audience it captured. Steve McQueen fans already knew what a Mustang was. Dukes of Hazzard viewers had at least a passing familiarity with Mopar muscle. But the kids who watched Transformers in 2007 were not muscle car people. They were not even particularly car people yet. They were teenagers who thought explosions were cool and Shia LaBeouf was relatable, and giant robots were the greatest thing since cinema had ever produced. The first-gen Camaro was not their entry point into the hobby. It became their entry point into the hobby. That is a completely different thing, and it is a significantly more powerful thing. They put the right car in front of the wrong demographic at exactly the right moment. Wrong in the sense that nobody in the classic car world was marketing to them. Right in the sense that they were young enough to be shaped by it and would eventually be old enough to act on it, and the market remembered every single one of them. After the cameras stopped, where did they go now? Where did the cars actually go? This is the chapter everyone wants, and the chapter where the honest answer requires some careful navigation. Because the post-production fate of the Transformers Camaros is significantly murkier than the studio's promotional materials would suggest. Here is what the official record shows. General Motors, who partnered with Paramount on the film as part of a broader promotional relationship, retained custody of at least one of the production vehicles following the completion of filming. This is not unusual. When a manufacturer provides vehicles or cooperates extensively with a production, they frequently negotiate to keep a car for display and promotional purposes. GM used Transformers vehicles extensively in auto show appearances and brand activations in 2007 and 2008. The cars were part of the marketing infrastructure for the film, which means they were traveling, being handled by multiple teams, and operating in the kind of institutional environment where chain of custody gets complicated fast. The hero car specifically, the one built for close-up work, made documented public appearances in the period immediately following the film's release. Auto shows, promotional events, the kind of circuit that movie cars and manufacturer partners run together in the release window. This is the car that people lined up to photograph. This is the car that appeared in the behind-the-scenes materials and the press junket coverage. Its whereabouts during this period are relatively well documented. What becomes less clear is what happened in the years following that initial promotional cycle. Because once the auto show circuit winds down and the next film in the franchise demands new vehicles and new promotional energy, the previous generation of cars tends to fall out of the institutional spotlight. They get moved to storage. They get transferred between facilities. The paperwork that tracks them through the promotional pipeline is not the same as the kind of provenance documentation that a museum or auction house requires. And that gap is where movie car history goes to get complicated. One of the stunt Camaros was documented at a Universal Studios Hollywood attraction in the years following the film, a part of the studio tour experience that capitalized on the film's success. Whether that car was the hero car or one of the stunt builds is a question with genuinely contested answers depending on which source you consult. The studio's own promotional materials from that period were not always precise about which specific vehicle was on display, which is a polite way of saying they were not always accurate. The hero car's journey following the trail. The hero car's journey beyond the promotional cycle is where the trail gets thin, and I want to be upfront about that rather than paper over the gaps with confident-sounding speculation dressed up as verified research. That approach would be easy. It would also be a disservice to anyone who actually cares about where this car ended up. So let's work with what is documented and be honest about where the documented record stops. The clearest single data point in the post-production history of these cars is a Barrett-Jackson auction in Scottsdale in 2014. A production Camaro from the original Transformers film crossed the block with documentation connecting it directly to the film. Not a tribute build, not a replica with a good story attached, a car with paperwork. It attracted the kind of serious attention that a verified screen-used vehicle from one of the highest-grossing franchises in Hollywood history should attract, which is to say, it attracted a lot of it. The car sold to a private buyer. The final number reflected both the condition of the vehicle and the weight of its provenance. Chain of custody confirmed, gavel dropped, car gone into private hands. That much is clean. What is not clean is the question of exactly which car it was, and that distinction matters more than auction houses typically acknowledge when they are writing lot descriptions. Hero car and stunt car are not interchangeable terms. To a collector who understands movie car provenance, the difference between the primary close-up vehicle and a stunt build configured for high-speed damage work is enormous. It is the difference between the car the audience fell in love with and a car that was built specifically to be destroyed in service of the one the audience fell in love with. Both have value. They do not have the same value, and the publicly available documentation from that Barrett-Jackson listing does not draw that line with the precision a serious preservationist would want to see. The franchise is confirmed. The production connection is confirmed. The specific role of that vehicle within the production fleet is where the language gets softer than it should. There is also the matter of at least one additional Camaro that remained in General Motors' possession for a significant period following the film's release. GM used it for display and educational purposes across various facilities, which is exactly the kind of institutional custody that sounds reassuring until you try to find out where the car is today. Institutional custody means the car moved when facilities moved. It means it was handled by teams whose primary job was not film preservation. It means the paperwork that tracks it through the GM system is not the same as a clear chain of title that a museum curator or an auction specialist can point to without hesitation. Whether that car is still inside the GM network or has since been transferred or sold privately is not something I can confirm from any public record, and I would genuinely rather leave that question open than close it with an answer I cannot stand behind. The myth, the replicas, and the confusion. Here is the part of the story that genuinely complicates everything: the replica problem. The Bumblebee Camaro is arguably the most replicated movie car of the 21st century. Not the most valuable, not the most historically significant, the most replicated. Because the combination of a widely available donor vehicle, a specific and achievable build spec, and an audience that grew up emotionally connected to the car created a perfect ecosystem for tribute builds. There are hundreds of them, maybe more. Rally yellow, black stripes, the specific wheel choice, the battle-damaged look from the early film sequences. Builders in every state have done their version. Small and a significant number of them are genuinely excellent. This creates a verification problem that is not unique to the Transformers cars, but is uniquely acute for them. When a replica is built to screen-accurate specifications by a skilled builder, distinguishing it from a production vehicle without documentation requires forensic-level examination. The VIN is the only clean answer, and VINs require records to mean anything. Records require custodians. Custodians require institutional memory. And institutional memory for a promotional vehicle that passed through multiple hands across a promotional cycle that ended 15 years ago is not always intact. What this means practically is that anyone claiming to have a production Camaro from the original Transformers film without ironclad documentation connecting the VIN to the production records should be approached with real skepticism, not hostility. Skepticism. The kind that asks to see the paperwork before it asks the price. There are legitimate production vehicles out there. There are also a lot of very convincing yellow Camaros with a good story attached. I say this not to diminish the replicas. Some of those tribute builds are extraordinary machines, and the people who built them love these cars genuinely. But if you are spending serious money on provenance, provenance has to mean something. And in this particular corner of the movie, car world, the signal-to-noise ratio is not great. Where things stand today. So where does that leave us? Let's be honest about the verdict. Here is what we know for certain. The production used multiple 1969 Camaros across filming. General Motors retained at least one vehicle for promotional use following the film's release. At least one production Camaro entered the private collector market through documented auction sale. The studio tour circuit had at least one production vehicle on display in the years following release. And the hero car, the primary close-up vehicle, has not surfaced in any public sale or institutional display with verified documentation in the years since the film's promotional cycle ended. That last point is the one that sits with me, because the hero car from a franchise that has grossed over $5 billion globally should not be a mystery. It should be in a museum. It should have been pulled from the promotional pipeline the moment the franchise proved what it was going to be, which was apparent by roughly the third week of its domestic run. Instead, it moved through the same institutional machinery that movie cars always move through. And somewhere in that machinery, the trail went quiet. Maybe it is in private hands with documentation that has simply never been brought to a public auction. Maybe it is in storage at a GM facility waiting for someone to rediscover it. Maybe it is sitting in a garage somewhere in Michigan or California in the hands of someone who knows exactly what they have and has no interest in selling it. Those are all plausible outcomes. None of them are confirmed. What is confirmed is that the car exists in the cultural memory in a way that guarantees it will matter whenever it surfaces. The kid who watched Transformers in 2007 and felt something when that beat-up yellow Camaro rolled off that used car lot is now in their late 20s and early 30s. Some of them have the resources to do something about that feeling. When this car surfaces, and eventually it will, it is going to land hard. The 1969 Camaro from Transformers is not the most valuable movie car ever built. It is not the most technically remarkable. It does not have the production history of the Bullitt, Mustang, or the cultural weight of the General Lee, or the wild post-production story of the Cobra Mercury. But it did something those cars did not do in quite the same way. It introduced a generation to the first-generation Camaro who would never have found it otherwise. It made a 50-year-old American muscle car feel urgent and alive to an audience that grew up in a world of imports and crossovers. And it did all of that while technically being a supporting character in a film about alien robots. That is a remarkable achievement for a piece of machinery, and it deserves a better answer than the one the record currently provides. If you have a credible lead on any of the production vehicles, the comment section is right below this video, and I read every single one. That is not a figure of speech. I actually read them. This is American Muscle. My name is Johnny, and we will see you in the next one. Do not forget to subscribe, because the next story is already better than you think it is going to be.